Awesome. Hey, guys. My talk does not have a theme song, sorry, although the first time I ran it for a few friends, I was watching Westworld in another browser tab by accident. So if it helps, you can imagine the theme song to Westworld as I talk. Okay, Phoenix presence. In my opinion, the right way to track users in real time. What does that mean, though? Track user presence in real time or track user engagement in a real-time feature? We actually encounter this kind of feature, I'm sure, all of us every single day. So you're on Slack, you see the little message at the bottom, so-and-so is typing. Same thing in like iMessage or a group chat. You see those nice little ... lets you know that somebody is about to send something your way. Or Google Docs is another really good example. You're collaborating on a Google Doc. You can see a list of people that are present interacting with the Google Doc at that point in time. It lets you know who's typing or who's editing it. All of those are examples of tracking user presence in a real-time feature in something like a chat room. Okay, so if you're familiar with Phoenix, or even if you've heard about it, you've probably heard of Phoenix channels, and you may have used channels to implement real-time features like a chat feature or push notification, something like that. So a channel pushes real-time information out to all of the subscribing clients. We can use a channel to broadcast an event to all subscribing clients, but how can we retain stateful information beyond the life cycle of a given event? What do I mean by that? So I think a really good example is someone joining a chat room. How can they see a list of all the users that are already present in that chat room, provided that you're not storing that list somewhere like inside the database? Speaking of the database, though, why not store it in the database? So you certainly can, right? You picture you have a chat room that you're maintaining and you want to store the list of people that are in the chat room right now in the DB. I don't think there's like a hard and fast reason why that's the wrong thing to do. Maybe there are people in this room that would argue that that's totally fine. It just doesn't really feel like the right fit to me. User presence, it's transient, it's stateful information. One moment you're going to have 4 people in your chat room, somebody leaves, now you have 3, somebody else, now you have 4 again. Doesn't really feel like you need to leverage the awesome power of your entire database just to keep track of something that is so transient and is so stateful. Even if you did decide, all right, screw it, I'm going to put everybody in the database, this question still remains of how do we share that information across all of our channels, right? Someone joins a chat room. We're still on the hook for figuring out ourselves how we want to broadcast that list to everybody that's in a chat room. We'd have to write all of our own client-side code. I'm listening for this event or this set of information, and seeing as I'm in a room full of people that like Elixir, I think we probably have a group of people that don't love maybe writing a lot of client-side code. Okay, so we don't like to store it in the database. You guys agree with me it's a terrible idea. What about hand-rolling our own user presence store? Could we leverage something like Agent or GenServer? You absolutely can, totally doable. I actually did do this for the feature that we're going to look at together today before I knew about Phoenix presence and how great it is. The problem with this approach is that you're still on the hook for writing a lot of your own code. If you're using Agent, for example, you have got to decide for yourself exactly what that data store is going to look like, define its initial state, write your own custom functions to update that state, and it still doesn't answer the question for us of how do I broadcast and share that information to all my subscribing clients, and how do I handle it on the front end without having to get really bogged down in a lot of JavaScript. So again, doable, but not really ideal. What about another storage system, though, like Redis or another centralized data store? So I have a Rails background, might be true of some other people in the room you've probably heard of or worked with Redis, a nice centralized data store. Kind of feels, though, like, Elixir has its own built-in distributed data stores. It doesn't really feel like it's in the spirit of your fancy, shiny new Elixir Phoenix application to leverage something like Redis. You could do it, though. I'm pretty sure there are ways to pull Redis into a Phoenix app, but it's not always really easy to scale Redis. It can be kind of a pain to query or get the information out of Redis that you've stored in there. And once again, even if you decided that Redis was the right fit for you, you're still in charge of broadcasting that presence information, handling it on the front end. It's a lot of code that we don't want to write. So what is the right way to do this? Shockingly, Phoenix presence. The Phoenix presence module gives you an API where you can register and store information regarding a given topic and expose that information to all of the topic's channels. Not only that, it allows us to store user presence information in a decentralized manner, in a resilient manner, and it provides us a really nice, easy-to-use API for broadcasting presence-related events from the back end, from our channels, and receiving them, listening for them, handling them on the front end without having to write a lot of our own code. Let's talk a little bit about what makes Phoenix Presence so special in terms of how it stores data. So it uses something called a conflict-free, this is like a tongue twister for me, conflict-free replicated data type, nailed it, to store and broadcast this topic-specific information. Not going to get too much into what that is, although I'll share some resources with you guys at the end of the talk. But Chris McCord has this to say about Phoenix Presence. It gives you high availability and performance because we don't have to send all data through a central server. It also gives you resilience to failure because the system automatically recovers from failure. So that's pretty cool, and it's one of the things that we love about the distributed systems that Elixir allows us to build. Okay, you're convinced Phoenix Presence is the right way to do this. How do we do it? So let's build a thing. I have set up an app for you guys, you're welcome, called Phoenix Pair. It's a real-time pair programming app with a shared text editor and chatting feature. So think Google Docs for collaborating on code challenge prompts like, Fibonacci number or something like that. We're already leveraging Phoenix channels in this app to handle the real-time text editing and chatting features. Users enter challenge or think chat rooms. They see a programming challenge prompt, and they can collaborate on it in the shared text editor. They can use the chat to talk to everybody else in the room. So we want our users to be able to see a list of people that are present in that chat room or that challenge room, and we want them to see an indication of who's currently typing in the shared text editor, who is responsible for the brilliant solutions that are getting edited into that text editor. We're going to use Phoenix Presence to display the users in the channel room and to indicate who's typing. Just to give you a sense of what we're going for, the resolution on this is not great, but you get the idea. Let's see, is that working? Play, no. Play. Yes? Awesome, cool. I'm typing, I'm glowing, there's ... dots, it looks amazing. That's what we're going to use Phoenix Presence to back for us, the fact that we have this list of present users and that we do have an indication of who is currently typing. So pulling Phoenix Presence into our app is really super easy to do. We're going to define a module that we'll call Challenge Presence, and we'll teach it to use the Phoenix Presence module. So pretty simple, we have our Challenge Presence module, we tell it to use Phoenix Presence, we give it a couple of other options, we give it awareness of our OTP app, which holds our application config, among other things, and we give it awareness of our pub sub server, which we get for free from Phoenix, which is pretty cool. In order to get our app to utilize our Phoenix Presence module, we want to add it to our supervisor tree. So we'll hop over to the start function for our OTP app, and we'll add Challenge Presence to our supervisor tree, and that's it. Our app is aware of our Challenge Presence module, and we can call on it in our channel whenever we want. So we're going to talk about tracking a couple of presence-related events and handling them on the back and the front end. 3 main events. We're going to talk about when a user joins the chat room or the challenge room. We're going to talk about when a user leaves the chat room, and we're going to talk about how to track and share awareness of the custom event of a user typing. So we're going to start with a user joining the chat room, since that is generally where our journey in this app begins. So we already have this challenge channel, which we'll take a peek at in a moment. It already has a join event that finds a given code challenge, sends it back to the client that initiated that event. What we want to do is we want to hook into an after join event that will trigger, that will add this new user that just arrived in the chat room to our presence data store's list of present users. And we also want to broadcast that information out to everybody who's already there. If there are 4 people already in the chat room, person number 5 joins, let's tell those 4 people, hey, there's 5 of you now, here's the new updated list. So we're going to take a peek at our challenge channel. I've pulled out all the code that's not 100% relevant to Phoenix Presence, so you're not going to see any of the work of sending the challenge back to the client. Just use your imagination for that stuff. So we've got our after join function that we're firing at the end of our join function. And that's where we really want to zero in right now. So we're calling on our challenge presence module. We're calling a method called, or a function rather, called track user join, which we'll look at in a moment, which does exactly what it sounds like. It takes the user that just arrived and it adds it to the presence store's list of users. The track user join function really just wraps a call to Phoenix Presence track, which registers this channel's process as a presence under a given top-level key that points to a map of metadata. We're going to see that data structure in a minute. So inside our challenge presence module, we have our track user join function, and it basically just calls track, passes in an argument of the socket whose topic or challenge or chat room we want to track presence within, along with the user ID and some metadata that we want to track for that user. And as I said earlier, the track function adds the user to our presence data store's collection or list of users for this topic. And this is what our data store basically looks like. So I feel like what we're looking at here is one of the first wins that we get with Phoenix Presence. I did not decide that this store should look that way. I didn't decide that I was going to have a top-level key of user ID, that I was going to have these metas, and that's how I was going to store it. Phoenix Presence does that for us. All we had to do was call track, pass it some information, and we are storing that user along with anybody else that is present in that channel topic. So that's kind of nice. We didn't have to develop any of this ourselves. Okay, so the user arrived in the chat room. We took their user ID. We added it to our presence data store's list of users. How do we tell all the clients who were already subscribing, or everybody that was already in that chat room, about the presence of this new person? Luckily for us, we sort of don't really have to do much of our own code or make our own decision about how to broadcast out that event. Calling track on our presence module broadcasts a presence diff event to all of the relevant channels, to everybody that's already subscribing to this chat room. And the event is broadcast for us with a payload describing users who joined or left the room. So this is the payload that gets sent out for us to all the subscribing clients. Another thing I really like about Phoenix Presence, which we're going to look at next, is it takes a lot of the decision-making out of our hands with regards to how we handle this stuff on the front end. I personally don't mind writing front end, at least JavaScript code. The front end of this app happens to be a React app. We don't care about that. We're not going to look at it. But we get to sort of plug into some functions that Phoenix Presence client-side library offers us without having to figure out a lot of stuff for ourselves. So let's talk about the presence diff event on the front end. With the help of the presence client-side library, the JS library, we get to listen for the presence diff event. We'll receive the presence diff payload. We'll really super easily update our list of current users that we're storing locally on the front end with the help of this presence sync diff JS function. And we can also really easily display the list of present users with this presence list function. So we're going to look at a little bit of JavaScript. I promise that we're looking at very, very little of it. So basically, we are listening for our presence diff event. When we receive it, we're going to fire this callback function that gets called with an argument of our diff payload, the data structure that we looked at earlier. We're leveraging the presence sync diff function, which will take in a list of our present users and basically reconcile it with the users in the join or leave keys of the diff payload. And then I'm calling on a helper function that I set up called sync present users, which wraps a call to our presence list function, which allows you to iterate over your list of present users and do stuff with them, like list out a list of names on that nice sidebar that we saw earlier. And that's pretty much it. The amount of code that you have to write on the front end to really seamlessly handle these events, very little, which is nice. Okay, so we talked about a user arriving in the chat room and how we're going to store that in our presence store and broadcast it out to everybody that was already there. But what about the person that just arrived? How does the user who just joined become aware or receive the list of all the people that were already there? Remember, it's not like we're storing it in a DB and I can just fetch it out. We know, however, that we're storing it in our presence module's data store. So we are going to dip into that and get it. And then we're going to send it back to our client. So we're going to broadcast something called a presence state event to the newly subscribed client, the person that initiated the join event, the person that just joined the chat room. And we're going to send that with a payload of the current list of presences for the given channel topic with the help of Phoenix Presence. So back in our after join event, in our challenge channel, we already tracked our user, right? We took the user that joined, we added them to the store's list of users that are there in that chat room. Then we're going to push this event back to the client that initiated event, the client who just joined, by calling push with the name of our event, present state, and the list of users currently present, which we can grab really easily by just calling the list function. And list is something that we just have access to because challenge presence uses the Phoenix Presence module. So we call challenge presence list socket. We get a list of users that are present in our presence store at that time, and we push it out or send that event back to the client that just joined the channel. So how do we handle the presence state event on the front end? The JavaScript presence class's sync state function will work for us exactly as it did when we were listening to our presence diff event. We'll call on it in the same way. It'll receive that diff payload, reconcile it with any presences that are already present, pun intended, and list them out with the help of the presence list function. So all we have to do is add a listener for the present state function, and the code that handles it, that callback function, is exactly the same as the code that we executed to listen for the receipt of our presence diff function. Okay, so we talked about joining a channel. We talked about how we'll alert everybody that's already there that somebody joined. We talked about how we'll let the person that just joined know about the people that were present before they arrived. What happens when someone leaves a channel? How can we broadcast that out to all the subscribing clients and let them know that the total list of people in that room or that chat room have changed? Much like everything else with Phoenix Presence, we hardly have to write any code to get it working. All we need to do is send a leave event to our channel. This automatically triggers a presence diff event, and we are already listening for and appropriately handling the presence diff event on the front end. So I love when the answer to the question of how to do something is like nothing, do nothing, and it just works. And that's for Charlie. Okay. Okay, so we talked about joining, we talked about leaving, and we're ready to talk about our custom event that we want to track here. This when a user is typing. When a user is typing, we want to add that really nice fancy glow, get that little ... going. So we want to broadcast that a user is typing to all of the topics subscribing clients. We're going to hook into this response update event that we already have our channel listening for. We're going to take a look at that now. So within this moment in time, right, when someone starts typing and they fire a response update event, we are going to call phoenixpresence.update, which does exactly what it sounds like. It updates the metadata value of a given presence key, and for free, just like with that track function, it triggers a presence diff event for us. So in our response update event in our challenge channel, we are going to call challenge presence do user update, which really just wraps a call to challenge presence update, and we're passing in our updated, the fact that the typing key should now be set to true. So this will update that metadata value under the key of the user ID in our presences stores list of users. And for free, without us having to do anything, it will automatically send out a presence diff event, which we're already listening for and handling on the front end. We don't have to write any more code to receive this information and become aware of it across all subscribing clients on the front end, which is really cool. That's really it for how Phoenix Presence work. We did it. We're smart. We're awesome at this. Thank you for your invaluable participation. A couple things just to sum up. So Phoenix Presence, I think, is really awesome compared to, again, like the amount of code that I personally had to write to implement the same feature, like just using agent, hand rolling all of those interactions around initializing your store, putting stuff in there, updating it, broadcasting it out to the client, listening for it to the client. Just takes so much of that off of your shoulder. So it's a really powerful tool for syncing user presence in a channel topic, stores it in a resilient and distributed manner. The front end offering you guys have seen makes it really easy to listen for these events on the front end without having to write a ton of JS on your own. List should have 3 things, so here's a picture of some RICs. And that's it. Here's some resources for you guys to check out. The Phoenix Presence docs, like all of the Phoenix docs, are really awesome and clear. Super recommend them. There's a blog post from Chris McCord around the time when Phoenix Presence first debuted. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about conflict-free replicated data types, you can check out that post. Definitely recommend that. And if you want to see the code for the project that we peeked into today, you can check out that repo. And that's it. Thanks, guys.